上吃饭去？
你他妈是要给我表白啊？
表个屁！我不想一个人。
要不要过来？
你们有没有想过，闭上眼睛，然后找个地方，闭上眼睛，然后找个地方，然后再来哟！
So hi everyone, welcome to this new episode of Carolyn Talks, the podcast / YouTube channel where I, your host Carolyn Heiss, talk to film creators about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today is one of my interviews for the 2023 Toronto International Film Festival, and I have the pleasure of being joined by filmmaker Anthony Chen to talk about his film The Breaking Ice, which I am very intrigued by because I have to say, I love how you use ice as an analogy for the emotions of these characters, as well as I think almost like the political state of the countries that they're in, because it's set in northern China and then as well in the Changbin province of like northern Korea, or is it just at the border, right?
Yeah, it's on the border of the Korean peninsula.
Yeah, right,
yes.
right where China joins up to North Korea. So I thought that was interesting. I kind of saw like the ice as an analogy for political tension, political connections, as well as the connections between these characters and their emotions. So it's about these three people who meet up, who just randomly run into each other, but they have such a deep connection and I think an intrinsic understanding of each other. Like sometimes strangers understand us better than the people closest to us. So I got that feeling from this film. But first, Anthony, I'm going to ask just to say a bit about yourself, because I like to ask my filmmakers about their journey to becoming film creative. So like you've made a number of films. You've made Drift, which we briefly talked about, which showed at Sundance early this year, which I love. But you have a film, there's Ilo Ilo and Wet Season, and I watched the trailers for both of them, and I kind of see like there's a true line between your films that I want us to talk about. But first, talk to me about becoming a filmmaker.
Becoming a filmmaker, I started film school at a very young age. I started film school at 17.
Wow.
And I went to film school twice. I went to 3-year film school in Singapore. And then I went to do my master's in directing at the National Film and Television School in the UK. I didn't know that I would end up being a filmmaker. I was very involved in on stage in theatre for a long time.
Yeah.
I've been performing on stage since I was 10 years old. So for a good 10 years. Okay. And I always thought that I would end up pursuing a career on stage as perhaps a theatre director, but we had to do in Singapore. We're a British colony,
right.
And in secondary school we had to all do English literature, and as part of literature, you had to do Shakespeare. And at 14, I was struggling so much with Shakespeare. Like I was thinking like, I didn't get him, he didn't get me. I do love Shakespeare a lot now, but at that point I was really struggling with it. And I was thinking like, oh my God, if you can't get into, the world's greatest, playwright, dramaturg, how are you gonna pursue a career in theatre? And during that time, that was when I started to expose myself into foreign films and cinema in a much greater definition. I grew up in Singapore, where it's very much, we were raised, at least I was raised on an appetite of Hollywood cinema. It was a lot of Bruce Willis, a lot of Arnold Schwarzenegger,
Sylvester Stallone.
Sylvester Stallone, and on the Hong Kong side, the Hong Kong cinema that came in, it was a lot of Stephen Chow, it was a lot of Jackie Chan, a lot of those films. So I think it was about when I was 14, 15, all of a sudden I started to discover like the French New Wave. You know, I started to discover filmmakers like Ho Xiaoshan from Taiwan and Ang Lee and Edward Young and Ozu, you know, one of my favorites, Yasujiro Ozu from Japan. And it just changed what I thought I knew about cinema. You know, like it had a different pace, it had a different color, it had a different smell. And that was when I was thinking, oh, okay, maybe if I couldn't be a stage director, maybe I could pursue film. And at the age of 15, I went on a forum online and bought a second-hand camcorder.
I always wanted one of those.
Yeah, it was a Hi8 camcorder. And I started to record my class, you know, my classmates for a whole year. So my very, very first piece of work was this 43-minute documentary of, my 16-year-old schoolmates.
Can I ask how old you are?
I'm 39.
Okay, so I just turned 40 at the end of August. So this is one of the reasons I love asking filmmakers about their path to becoming like filmmakers, is because I always find that it's so interesting for me for Asian cinema in particular, because I find I always have some kind of commonality or something similar. I am from Barbados, which is a former British colony. So like when you started talking about secondary school and having to read Shakespeare, for us it would have been around the same time. Like it's the same thing, you know, like in primary school we had to read books like Dick and Jane, Fun with Dick and Jane, or those kind of books. And then in secondary school we didn't really get many Caribbean books to read. Now it's better that for the generations that came up, but in my generation, I think one of the few books we had was a book called The Pearl that was like based on like indigenous culture, but it was mostly like Shakespeare, those kind of books, you know, Jane Austen. I fell in love with Jane Austen because that's what we had to read in school. But I was like you, I couldn't get the connection between Shakespeare, but I did get the connection with Shakespeare when I got older, when I started watching like a lot of like British TV, like BBC and PBS. That's how I got it in connection. So it's the same way, but like one of the reasons I do love covering Asian films and speaking of Asian filmmakers, because I grew up watching Hong Kong cinema. I grew up watching like the Shaw Brothers action films. I grew up watching films like the Silver Fox movies. You know, one of my favorite filmmakers is Zhang Yimou. And that's my history. Yes, I had like the Terminators, the Die Another Day, Die Hard and all that. But for me, my heart has always been with Asian cinema. And I think for a lot of filmmakers, especially those from former colonies of the British and even like the French and the Spanish and what have you, I think there's a sensibility in the films that I don't find with North American productions. A lot of the stories that I'm attracted to is, again, like stories about having to move from home, finding your identity even where you live. You know, and it's not the same thing for me like with a lot of North American films, or like you have like the first or second gen immigrants having those kind of discussions. It's about finding your place even in the home that you live in. You know, like in Barbados, like I know Barbados is my island home, but I know that my people were brought there against their will. Like we are not the indigenous people. So it's kind of the same thing where you have that kind of struggle. And I can see in your films, like for the films, like for this film, The Breaking Ice, your characters are having a struggle with finding who they are, where they are at like, in life, you know? And so I want to talk to you about that. So like just bringing all of that history that you have and all of that, in a sense, displacement at a very young age and turning it into the kind of stories that you're attracted to telling. So talk to me about like just finding I think it's your identity as a filmmaker, because you couldn't find it as a young person because you weren't sure if you wanted to do stage production. But now a lot of your films are about finding identity, because watching the trailers, I was like,
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, in fact, I think I'm constantly, you know, I made a film called Drift, right, this year. And it was about an African sort of Liberian refugee that ends up on the shores of a Greek island. And it's about identity as well. And I feel like I'm constantly drifting. I feel like I'm constantly, you know, this outsider finding his place in the world. When I start looking back at all my films, my first feature film, you know, I had... before The Breaking Ice, I had two feature films that played at TIFF as well. There was Ilo Ilo, my first film that premiered in Cannes. I won the Camera d'Or, and it was about a Filipino sort of maid, a helper, and the relationship she had with a 10-year-old boy that she was taking care of. And it was about the outsider, you know, like in a Singapore family.
Yeah.
My second film, Wet Season, it was about a Malaysian sort of teacher, Chinese teacher that was struggling with her marriage, struggling with her career. She's struggling to fit into Singapore society. And then, of course, you've got Drift, which is a refugee film. And then now with The Breaking Eyes, the three of them, you know, they don't belong to the city where I filmed them. You know, they're all sort of like outsiders as well. They're all, you know, young people trying to, you know, find their place in the world, trying to struggle with, their own sort of wounds in life. So I feel that this whole idea of displacement, this whole idea of drift thing, and that whole outsider experience, you know, somehow it's not like I set out making every film saying like, oh, I'm gonna make my next outsider film, but I guess that's what it is. You know, I grew up, you know, in Singapore, you know, and then later on I went to film school in the UK. I've lived in London, in Britain for 15 years. Do I feel English or British? No. I made a home there. You know, I got married there. My son was born in Britain. But constantly, I think I'm always trying to find my own identity. You know, and figure that out. And I think you're constantly looking for answers, you know, but there are no real answers.
There's none, because life changes, and with that we change too. Even as because I relate so much to you trying to find out who you are, because I'm an immigrant too. So I've been living here since 2009. So is it this 15 or 16 years? I can't remember. But so and then, again, we kind of transitioned at the same time, but one of the things that keeps me, I try to keep myself centered to remember where I'm from, is I call myself an immigrant. There are people I know who've been living here way longer than I have been, or even shorter. They don't consider themselves immigrants.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, I'm a Canadian, and they accept it. And I'm a Canadian citizen. I had citizenship since I was 13, but I call myself an immigrant because I do it to remind myself that I'm Barbadian first. That's where we would say my navel string is buried, you know, and that's where that's where my family's birthright is from. But also is to remind myself that the land that I'm living on isn't mine. Like, it belongs to the indigenous people first. Because the Canada that we know of is a colony. It was colonized by the British too. And I claim the title of an immigrant to pay respect to the fact that I know that this land is not my land.
Yeah.
You know, and all of the history that comes from that. And it kind of always upsets me when, especially for a lot of people, like, because we were talking about finding displacement, a lot of that goes back to colonialism. And colonialism plays such a big part in who we are and like how we consider ourselves. And even for the three characters in The Breaking Ice, they're not dealing with colonialism, but they're dealing with the effects of war. Because like you have North and South Korea because of a war. Well, two technically, because you had the Second World War, but then you also had the war in Korea. I don't call it the Korean War because they didn't technically start it. But that's a whole different discussion. But these are still three young people, as you said. They're in a place that neither of them can claim as their own, you know, and they're sitting literally on the border. Like, this film takes place on a border, and a border is also a point of transition. Talk to me about making this film about the transition for these three characters, because they're all in this place. I find like winter is coming to an end and it's finally turning into spring for them. The seasons are changing for them, and they also they're in each other's lives for a season, but their seasons personally are changing. So talk first about deciding, I'm going to make a film about seasons. I'm going to make a film about transitions and borders and change.
I think it's interesting. You know, I feel like this film was very much a result of, I call it a post-pandemic film, you know?
Everything is post-pandemic. Like, there's the before and the after.
But I think a lot of the emotions that I was capturing came out of my own existential crisis, that I experienced during the pandemic. And at the time I was reading, like, it wasn't like I was actively looking for them, but there were just so many articles everywhere, whether in China, in the UK. I was in London at the time, and it felt like there was a whole generation of young people that felt anxiety, that were dealing with mental health issues, that felt helpless and hopeless, and they stopped trusting the systems, they stopped trusting the establishments, the institutions, and they start having, this existential sort of questioning of like, what's the point of everything?
Yes, we all like, what's the point? It's all the world is going to hell in a handbasket.
I think it was very much, I was feeling a lot of that as well, and then I was reading a lot about that, and I just thought, I wanted to make a film about it, which is why you have got 3 slightly fractured young people, 3 strangers that sort of bonded together over a very short time, and it's really about their mutual healing, them trying to find some kind of solace and warmth in one another, and that allows them, to move on with their lives. And it's quite interesting because I always appreciate those moments, where you meet a complete stranger. In fact, I just arrived in Toronto yesterday, yesterday morning.
So you must be tired.
No, but I had that one similar experience. I met another filmmaker, I just saw his film, and we just, chatted, but it just became, not that it became philosophical, but at some point it became very spiritual, and it became very moving, and it felt very simple, but it felt very profound. I think sometimes, from time to time in life, we meet people, we meet strangers, and that very short, brief connection, is what you need to sort of rebuild yourself, or regain some hope, or reaffirm some of the things in life that you believe in. And I think that is very much the essence of this film.
Yeah, no, I get it completely, because I'm the same, because sometimes you do meet people, like, briefly, where, like, you just sometimes happen to be talking about your life, and it's happened to me many times, especially during interviews. Like, I've had directors say things to me where I was thinking about it, but I didn't feel comfortable discussing with anyone, and they would just happen to mention something in the interview, and they'd tell me something, and I'd be like, oh, wait, this is exactly what I was thinking, but I needed someone to, like, reaffirm what I was thinking, or like, even to help me think about it from a different perspective. And, like, that's been happening a lot for me during this stuff, because a lot of the films I've been watching have been about parental relationships, and I'm like, I have issues with my parents, and I'm like, these films are, like, kind of like speaking to me and making me like, okay, I'm like, Carolyn, you do need to sit down and, like, really think about specific things. And the thing with this film, like, the 3 characters, like, so there's, like, Nana, Hao Feng, and Han Xiang, and I'm gonna start with Hao Feng, because the film starts with him, and he clearly has severe depression. And, like, that could have been coming again from this film, like, whether it was because of the pandemic or stress from his job, because it's implied that he has a very high stress job. He makes a lot of money, but he's not fulfilled not fulfilled by it. He's feeling lost, like, he just gets on the store
and it feels
bus.
like he has done everything. He has ticked the boxes in life.
Yes, he's done everything that's
he's done well in
expected of him.
school. He has worked hard. He has gone out, like, moved out of his hometown, gone to a bigger city, has a proper job, well-paying job, but what's the point of it all? Yeah,
like, he's alone. He doesn't have any plants. He doesn't have a dog, a cat, a fish, nothing, and he doesn't have any close relationships, because he's able to get on this tour bus, and, like, the only people that's calling him is someone from a mental health institution, like, they're saying you need to have a checkup. And then you notice, I'm like, no friends are calling him, his parents aren't calling him to say, where are you, what's going on? And, like, you can tell that he's, again, feeling isolated and alone, which is where to me, I read the setting of them being in this place where they're displaced, being very cold and very winter talks a lot about his emotional state. He feels very isolated and very cold and shut off from everyone. And that's something that I can relate to, because at the beginning of the pandemic, I had to self-isolate almost for almost the half end of the 2020 to the beginning of 2021, because I had COVID for the first time.
Yeah.
And I was at home with my twin sister, but I was isolated in my own bedroom. Like, we had to be separated, right? So the only time we'd interact, she'd leave food at the bedroom door for me, but I still felt super alone, even though I'm in a house with my sister. So I really related to that sense of like, you're surrounded by people, but you just can't connect to them. And for him, like, he broke my heart, because I've been officially diagnosed with like depression and antidepressants, and I'm like, there's that point where you're just thinking like, again, what is the point? Like the thing with depression that a lot of people don't understand is like for this character, he wants to cry but he can't, and suddenly there's a point your emotions are just so suppressed. You want to cry, but you physically can't bring yourself to cry, and suddenly you fear, like, even if you do start to cry, that you won't stop. And there's a scene where he's in this bar and he takes this ice block, and he puts it on his ice, and it was on his ice, and like the water from the ice block starts to run down. And I saw that as imitating the tears that he wishes he could cry, but he can't. So I want you to talk to me first about Hao Feng, because that character, I was like, I just wanted to like give him a hug, and I'm like, I totally understand where you're coming from. And like the only person I even really saw what was going on was Han Xiang, because he just happened to get a glimpse of that scene.
That's right. I read a lot about I think it's not just the current young generation. I think, in our world these days, we all have to deal some form or another with mental health issues, and it's quite interesting, because I think a lot of the portrayal of whether it's a depression or mental health problems, it's a very stereotyped version of it, where you think like, oh, they would stay in their homes, they would sort of close all the curtains, switch off the lights, and then they'd tuck themselves into bed, and they'd just be there, dealing with their loneliness and all that. But the truth is, they're everywhere.
Functioning depression.
They are working, they have social lives, and you think they're completely, very, very normal. I've read certain articles, I've even seen some vlogs online where you've got young people that are that have put the camera on themselves, and they're sort of capturing their life, working, living, on their own and all that, and you think like, oh, they're perfectly normal and confident, and then all of a sudden they stop and they disappear, and then you realize that they've taken their lives. And that's the thing, I feel that was where this character came about. Because I don't think they're the stereotype sort of mentally ill patient that we think that we think it's shown a lot or discussed a lot, I think I wanted to go for a more accurate portrayal. And of course, not that it was, and of course I found my own ways, using the eyes, using the metaphors and all that. I think, I almost feel like this film, it's not so plot heavy.
No, it's not.
But it's very much about emotions, and I think there's, for me, it's a film about spirit. It's a film about emotion. It's a film where, if you closely watch these characters, like, it's not completely implied, like, oh, who they are, what they are, all the backgrounds, like what's the inciting incident that they're dealing with. But I think you could feel their wounds and their fractures. It's for them, it's about,
like as we were saying, like sometimes you meet people and they just think, but it's not that you don't have to give them your whole backstory, but they're able to meet you where you are and see you as you are in that moment and are able to address the issues that are there. Because I think the problem is with, especially for a lot of people who are depressed and suffer from depression, and especially functioning depressives, is that again, they, as you said, they look normal or they look fine, and people, oh well, you're fine, so you're not really depressed, you know. But it's like for a lot of people, like for me, my depression isn't necessarily an outward presentation. Like for me, when I get into a really bad episode, I get very quiet.
Yeah.
You know, I don't like hole up myself in my bed or anything, but I just get very quiet. I'll sit and I'll watch a film, but I'm not talking. Like I'm not interacting with what I'm watching, and I just stop talking. I'll take my dogs on a walk, but I won't be talking to my dog. And my sister usually my sister's the one who has to tell me, because she'll be like, "Are you okay?" And I'll be like, "What?" She's like, "You're not talking." Right? And like, cause I'm a hummer, like I just hum randomly at the thing, and she'll tell me, she's like, "You're not humming," you know. She's like, "You're very quiet, like you're not talking." So that's when I have to catch myself.
You're retreating into yourself.
I'm retreating myself, and like you're not aware, right? And like that's the thing for this character for
it's just like Hao Feng, you know, like he has this habit of sort of chewing ice cubes.
Yes.
And I think it's his way of retreating into his own world, you know?
He's literally ingesting the coolness. I saw it as
in
like
fact,
kind of
the
like
very, very first scene when I open the scene with him, the moment he starts crunching the ice cubes, you'd see what I did with the sound. Like, I took away all the sound around him.
It's very unnerving.
Yeah, so all of a sudden, you don't hear the walla walla, the atmos of the other people, and he's literally, you know, has recluded into his own world.
Right, yeah. So I related a lot to Hao Feng in that way. And like there's moments where like there's a scene, and I'm so happy that you did it in this way where, again, like people have this misconception of what suicidal ideation is, and it's not like a big thing. It's just like going to the edge of the stairs and looking down.
Yeah.
Watching the snow fall off the edge and say like, perhaps I could be the ice falling off the thing. And it's not like, no, but I'm gonna no, that's not. It's a very quiet thing. And when you did that, I was like, you get it. That's the thought was. I was like, he gets it. It's not like this big declaration that they make. It's just like it's just like a thought that runs through your head and say, what if I was like this snow that just fell off the edge?
Yeah.
What happens?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So when you did that, like, talk to me about working with the actor in those particular scenes, because I love how, and this is not going to be a spoiler, but I love how you juxtapose that with another scene that happens later on in the film on the mountain.
Yeah.
Where he goes there, but then instead of a moment of depression, it's more of a moment of reclamation, where he's like reclaiming himself. And I can see him like saying, you know what, I'm going to go get medication, I'm going to go get therapy after this.
Yeah.
So talk to me about working with the actor and like discussing the depression with him, and like how you're going to work through it in the film.
I think it wasn't that hard. You know, I made a list of films, you know, and some of these films contain scenes or characters that, you know, deal with mental health issues. He's seen those films. I sent him a lot of articles to read, books to read. So it's about getting one into that zone, you see. And I think there are moments in his life where there have been dark patches as well, and it's about sort of harnessing and remembering those moments. I don't think with all three actors, you know, it was a very, very I would say it was a very, very constructive and very pleasurable experience working with them, because I think there was a lot of trust, and I think with trust, you know, like they completely trusted the material, they trusted what I was doing, they trusted that I was sincere about it. You know, like if I was the director that said, you know what, and then, you know, you start going mental and you start pulling your hair, and then you're doing all this crazy stuff, I think they would start to distrust you. But there was, you know, I think when they feel the purity of the motivations, I think when they feel where you're coming from, that sincerity and that honesty, I think if everyone was very, very honest about where we're going with these characters, where we're going with the emotions, that's how you capture some kind of emotional truth on screen.
Yeah. and the audience picks it up, because I picked it up, and that's, I think, for films like yours, like for like the Breaking Ice, which as I begin,
I'm very, very glad that you picked it up. You know why? Because this is the first art house film he has been in. He has always been in huge, big commercial sort of like tentpole films.
You know, his face is very familiar to me.
Yeah, so I think for a lot of the mainstream audiences, they were just very uncomfortable seeing him in that state. You know, like I think they were more critical of like, oh, why has he got a mustache? Like, why does he look so dreary? And he isn't like what we used to see of him in other films. And they were coming in with a lot of baggage. And for me, what is interesting about my process is that as a filmmaker, whether it's this film or every film, I never ever bring judgment or baggage into making a film.
Right.
You know, I don't judge my characters. You know, I come in with an open heart, with an open mind. And yeah, it's not about me putting on or placing certain values or labels on these characters. And it's great that you felt that.
No, I did, because I for me personally, I think because I've been through so much in my life, like so many things. Like when I watch films like this, I can always tell when the filmmaker and the performers and even the people behind the cameras, cinematographers, editors, whoever, just like you have like the good intention of the story they're making.
Yeah.
When you come with it, if you come with it with positive and, as you said, sincere intentions, it comes through on screen, because you're not making a mockery of what of the topic. You know, you're not making a mockery of the discussion of depression. You're not making a mockery of the discussion of isolation, or even like you talking about Nana's character next. Like, she had an injury. You know, she was an athlete, and like she lost her path as an athlete because of this injury, and you reveal to us to that in such a, I think, a very natural way, where it's not immediately announced what her issue is. Because I think the way you introduce her first by having her connect with how Feng shows the sincerity, where it's first about getting her to see him, getting her to open up to him, and then her seeing where he is at in his life makes her feel comfortable and saying, okay, you know what, maybe I need to also take a step back and reevaluate my own situation and face, like, to use the term, face my own personal demons, right? And there's a sincerity in that, because I watch films where it's about depression or whatever, and I can tell, first of all, the filmmakers didn't do any research. You can tell like they came in with their own misconceptions or preconceptions about mental health and see it as one way. But for this film, like, you address different forms of mental health issues. It's not just depression. It's also about loss, because in Nana, like, for her, she lost something that was very intrinsic to her, who she was as a person, and that affects you mentally. You know, it's not just about missing a sport, missing being on the ice. It's about her missing a place that she was comfortable at. She was at home.
Yeah, and also I think, you know, for athletes like that, you know, it's especially if you're in, whether it's figure skating or in gymnastics, the actress who played Nana in the film, when she was very young, around that age, you know, like in her preteens, she was training as a gymnast. So she has been through sports training for 3 years as a gymnast. And what is it like if, you know, like, it's a very, very short lifespan that you have as a gymnast or a figure skater. You know, like, you peak at about 18, 19, and you start at a very young age. Some start at 9, some start at 10, and go to sports school, and, you know, you have long hours of training. You're told that you're very talented. You're told that, you know, one day you win the Olympic medal. But what if you're raised with only that one dream? What if you are holding on, you know, like, the dreams of your family, your coaches, like everyone, you know, like, what if you were only living for that one thing? And when that one dream is dashed, how do you rebuild your life again? Because it's not so much about letting yourself down, right? It's that feeling of you've let your family down, you know, like, you know, the team around you, the country, like everyone, you know, and how do you pick yourself up from that? And if you have only that one strength in life, you know, that, you know, or one talent in life, or that's the only thing that you think you're good at, you know, how do you redefine yourself again?
How do you find a new new path.
Which is
It's
why
hard.
for me it's how like one damaged person,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like reads another damaged person, and how they can see the cracks and wounds of one another.
They do, and like sometimes the person that does do the reading doesn't even realize that they themselves have cracks. Like for her, I felt like she was running and she didn't know she was running. Like running was just like this instinctual thing that she had.
Yeah.
And for her, running meant literally running from the furthest place she could get from home, which was literally on the border of China and North Korea, becoming an interpreter on a tour bus. And I thought that's like another symbolism of borders. Like she herself is stuck between these two, technically these two countries, but it's more about between her past as an athlete and like what does she do now, you know. She's like, I'm just drifting, going back and forth, because for as a tour guide she's doing the same route over and over and over again. She's like spinning in a circle,
escaping, you know, like from her past, you know. And at the end, you know, for me it's about her confronting it again.
She
you know, her confronting her own failure, confronting, you know, like all the letdown in life that she had. Because her being a tour guide, it was a camouflage. It was her way of holding things together. It was her way of, you know, like, you know, she used all that talkative spirit to camouflage all the pain, the sadness in life.
She's guiding people, but she herself is lost. You know, which I thought was like a really cool juxtaposition. Like, you are guiding. I'm like, I have all of these answers about this history, and I know I can show you this place, I can show you this place, but she herself doesn't have a direction. You know, she's just aimlessly like wandering on like a circuitous path, almost like I likened her to like a hamster in a wheel, spinning in a circle, you know, like just going, but not really going anywhere. And her character, the bear, first of all, I'm not gonna spoil it again, but the bear, like literally, I was like, the bear, what's that? but like you said, it's about facing down your fears, and like that's the most terrifying thing that you can do. And it's like she had a physical manifestation of that, but for a lot of people, just the idea of even like saying, you know, I need to deal with this situation is terrifying, you know. And all three of them, they have that moment of facing that fear. For Hao Feng is also on the mountain. For her, it's the bear. And then for Han Xiang, it's the truck. You know, playing that game of chicken, or I think it's also called like Russian roulette, where he's just going, and it's like you're thinking. In my head, I was thinking this better not end the way I think it's gonna end, because I see too many Asian films that end with a horrific tragedy at the end, and then it like ends off. I was like, please don't. But then like that's facing on his fear, and like I think he's another character where you might think, okay, Hao Feng and Nana have the real story, but I think Han Xiang is like an enigma. You know, he's an enigma, and he's like the glue between the two of them, because he sees the both of them for what they are, and he sees their cracks and their wounds, as you're saying. But I think he's, out of the three of them, he's the one who knows what his cracks and wounds are. He
hasn't done anything.
But he hasn't done anything about it. He's very much aware of where he's struggling, and he's just afraid to do it. So he's at the moment of Nana and Hao Feng. They haven't decided yet to confront. He knows he has to, but he's just afraid to take that step. And seeing both Nana and Hao Feng give him the strength to say, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to step out and do what I've been dreaming about doing what other people have been telling me is impossible for me to do. And so like they gave him that strength. But I thought he was beautiful. I thought he was a beautiful character because he's so observant. He's so very, very observant. Like the way he watches Hao Feng, like in the scene in the club where he was the ice block, and I like that he doesn't go up to him or judge him. He just like watches him and observes him. And like I think my favorite, that scene in the club, and then my other favorite scene in the film is where he's at the window smoking, and Hao Feng is on the bed like curled up, and you have the camera focus not necessarily on Hao Feng, but the reflection on the we call it a wardrobe because it's like laminate so shiny, and I love that you can see him, and I kind of saw it as like his silhouette as almost like watching over Hao Feng.
Like there was a real human connection of people quietly take care of one another.
He's just like, I'm just gonna let you lay on this bed and do what it is you need to do in this moment. I think he's my favorite character, Han Xiang, because so I'm like, you're there, dude, and like people might overlook him, but I'm like, nah, you're the one that people need to pay attention to the most, because you're the one that gets it. You're the one that sees what everyone else is doing.
I do love his character. I think there was something about, you know, like he's slightly I think he hasn't got a lot of, even though he looks, suave and cool and all that, but I don't think he has that much inner confidence.
No, I think he's kind of shy. He's very shy.
You could see that, he feels, especially with the arrival of Hao Feng, he sees like, oh, this is the successful guy in the city, and you could feel like he's got some sort of inferiority complex. He's got quite a innocent, simple mind, but he's got dreams inside as well. Like he talks about, I've not really got out in the world, I've not really seen much, but you could see, there's a desire there, and at the end, I felt it was very important that he gives himself that opportunity, that chance to venture into the world, to like he might be let down by the world, he might be or he might actually, I don't know, he might become a chef somewhere in Europe or whatever, but I feel it's very important that in life at least you have been there, done that. You feel like you have not had regrets,
right.
Which is why at the end, yes, it feels like 3 tragic characters, but no, I'm not gonna end the film because I think I'm quite an optimist, and I always believe in hope. I always believe in light at the end of the tunnel, and I think it's very important at the end. No, it's not the feel-good, happy ending, but I want to feel like they've all, like found more confidence, found more spirit in life to move on, to take that next stride.
Yeah, like you said something that I think is very interesting about Han Xiang. You said he's very simple and very quiet. To some people, like hearing someone be considered simple might seem almost like an insult, but I think for him it's a perfect.
I think there was something because there's a childlike innocence.
Yeah, but the thing for him, he doesn't have to be like a world traveler to have worldly knowledge. Yeah. He may not have ventured out into the world and may have just lived his life up to this point in this small location, but he understands human nature very well. I think for out of the 3 of them, he's the one that understands how people think the most, people's motivations the most, and he understands. As I mentioned, he reads people because he knows exactly what Hao Feng needs in that moment. He understands what Nana needs in that moment because, like, as you said, like he had feelings for Nana, romantic feelings, and then he saw Hao Feng come in, and he could have been like, he may have been a bit jealous at the beginning, thinking, oh, like this guy is coming as like a competition or whatever. Yeah. But he doesn't take it there. He's like he watches and sees their interaction. He's like, wait, okay. So like I think in my head I saw him as saying, you know what? He needs Nana in a way that I don't need her.
Yeah.
And Nana needs him in a way that she doesn't need me. Like Nana still sees me. I'm still Nana's friend. Nana still comes up to me like when she touches him and like she like reaffirms their friendship and she reaffirms I still see you. You're not disappearing. And he just like he quietly steps back and gives them the space to do what needs to be done because he grows to be very assured of his place in their relationship and he grows to be very assured of himself. As you said, as a person, as confident, he's like, I don't need other people to reaffirm who I am. He's like, I don't need people to validate my existence, and I love that about his character. He's quiet, but I think he's so interesting. He's so complicated and complex. And I love characters like that, the ones that surprise you the most. Because at the beginning, you think, okay, Hao Feng is the protagonist. But to me, I kind of say, I saw Han Xiang as the person, he's like the linchpin in the entire thing.
I think the interesting thing about this film, I really think it's a three-hander.
Yeah.
There isn't one true, this is whose story. I think it belongs to all 3 of them. Mm-hmm. And in a way, this very perfect sort of triangle, it almost feels like at this point in time, in this short, brief moment in time, they were just perfect for one another. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's all you need in life.
Yeah.
And you know what? It doesn't even need to be like that forever. Because there are people that would ask me like, oh yeah, but why are they not together forever and ever? Right. But I go like, I'm not sure if like all these damaged people, if they're gonna continue forever. It's like I think it's gonna be very toxic. But
it might eventually erode. Right?
But for that brief moment in time, that's all they need. They need some understanding. They need some space. They need the right people, to enter their lives. To allow them to reflect upon themselves, allow them to sort of like turn into the next chapter.
Yeah, no, it's true, because I'll be honest with you, when I was watching the film, I was like, is this going to be a poly relationship, and I was thinking, okay, like, and then I even on my way here for this interview this morning, I was thinking every romantic relationship isn't revolved around like a sexual relationship. It doesn't have to be poly in the sense of like a romantic relationship between the three of them, but they still do have, to me, a romantic relationship. Like, I had this conversation with another director, Celine Song, the director of Past Lives, and we talked about the modern concept of romance versus the old concept of romance. Like, using Shakespeare as an example, where that was a period of romanticism in painting, in literature, in music, and it wasn't always just about having as what we consider romantic relationship with people. Like, you had a romantic relationship with somebody you had a soul bond with, and I think they have a soul bond. They're like, they may, even if they may never meet each other again. I hope they do. That's kind of like my headcanon, that they meet up like maybe 10 years later and be like, where were you? But like, their soul bond is like they were in each other's lives at such a pivotal moment of transition that they will always have that connection. They will always have that deep knowledge of each other that no one else will have of them, and that's, to me, romantic.
Yeah, I find the relationships that they have all formed, the bonds that they've developed, like between one another, I find it incredibly moving. I think it's more moving than a long 20-year romance, and I find it incredibly memorable as well.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's what you need of, that's what we treasure a lot in life. It's when, from time to time there'll be people that they leave fragments in you, and those fragments are moments that you would think about from time to time again.
Yeah.
And it allows you to feel good about yourself.
Yeah, it becomes a treasured memory.
Yeah.
Something that when you're old and gray, you'll be like, I remember this week that I had with these two amazing people, and it becomes something that you can reflect on. And like, for you as the filmmaker of that, like, what do you think about, like, you're like on reflecting about this story that you're making? Like, what do you think about saying, I did that, like, I made this amazing thing? Like, for you, how is it being able to sit back and reflect on the stories that you're telling, and then say, maybe, like you said, like, for this could have been like a catharsis for you in a way, going back
I think
to
so. I almost feel like, even though it was so cold, like, we made this film
literally cold,
minus 20, minus 30 degrees, but in spite of them, like, the memory of making this film, the memory of being in this border city, in one of the coldest places in China, like, that winter, I think it's gonna be the most memorable winter for me. Like,
I don't think
perhaps,
I think just being there will be memorable itself.
Perhaps forever, because I grew up in Singapore. I grew up in a tropical country,
yes.
and it's summer all year round, and there's something quite romantic about the experience of, like, bringing all these actors on board, having all these actors coming on, having all these head of departments, and believing in making a film that, if you've seen enough mainland Chinese films, it's unlike any mainland Chinese film. Like, I don't, even after we've made the film, we're like, oh, we've never quite seen a Chinese language film like that before.
Yeah.
It's very, I think together we've created something quite special, and and it's a memory for a lifetime, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, it sounds right, but I think being in the cold, having that experience, like, being in the cold would like trigger like that memory. Like, imagine that you're going somewhere in winter, you'd be like, oh, I remember when it was this bitterly cold. But then you can like think, instead of that memory of a bitterly cold day being a bad memory, it's a good one. You'll be like, I remember when we filmed this particular scene and how it worked out. And so, like, that turns into a good memory. The thing about the cold, I think, about the cold is, to me, the cold doesn't stifle this film. I think it really allows us to really think about the position the characters are in. Like, for instance, like, the beginning of the film, and it was literally the first time I've ever seen this happen, where people were harvesting the ice blocks from the lake, and I was like, I've never seen that on film ever, and that made me, I was like, okay, this film is gonna give me something that I've never seen. Just that alone, like they just took out these big giant ice blocks, and I was just thinking, how did you and your crew even do that? Because that's an extremely precarious and dangerous position. But then I was thinking, this is a real job that people apparently do have. So talk to me about that, because it's a fun thing for me, because
I discovered that
confused.
like when I was researching about the north of China, I chance upon a lot of videos on social media of ice harvesting. Some of them like this ice, they are made in sculptures, ice sculptures and all that. And I was like, oh my god, I need to capture that on film. And yeah, so that was the very last day of our shoot.
Oh, okay.
Why? Because we needed to make sure that it was cold enough, that the lake was frozen enough, that that the ice was thick enough, such that the entire crew can be there, and it would be safe for us. Because if you are standing on thin ice,
right?
Yeah, it's very dangerous.
To use the pun fully intended.
And we got a whole ice harvesting team there, and we filmed that.
Wow.
And for the longest time, I still remember when I wrote that scene. It was the first scene that I wrote, in the script, and the production team, the production manager was saying, like, Anthony, do you really, really need to shoot this? Because it's very hard. Like, so there was so many times where we had to find an ice harvesting team, that knows what they're doing first.
Yeah.
And second, we had to find the right lake, and it need to be frozen enough such that it would be safe enough to do that. So we kept pushing back this scene in terms of when we're going to shoot it, until this became the very last scene that we shot. And after the scene, we had to wrap the film, because it was cold enough such that we could shoot the scene.
But also too cold, you were just like, you know what?
And I was so glad that I kept pushing for it. I didn't go like, oh, it's fine, we don't need to open the film like that, we can do without the scene. No, I was quite stubborn about it.
Yeah, why do you think that particular scene about harvesting ice was so important to you?
Because even before I wrote the entire script, I had a very strong idea that ice was going to be a very important, whether you call it a symbol or metaphor in this film. I kept thinking about ice. Why? Because I kept thinking about the process of how ice forms. From water solidifying into ice. It's very quick. At the right temperature, it takes like 2-3 hours.
Yeah, it's another moment of transition.
And then when it melts from ice, when you put it out, on the table or whatever it is, almost instantaneously it starts melting. And that whole transient sort of feeling, that whole transient process was what I wanted to capture on this film. It's like how these three people, how did they manage to bond and develop, such a complex relationship in such a short in such a short time? But it comes very quickly, but it ends very quickly as well, and how it all melts away. But what's left, it's the memory and the emotions that allow them to continue with their lives. And so I felt very, very strongly about this whole imagery of ice, and I wanted to capture it.
No, and it makes sense, because as you were just talking about it, this film wouldn't work the way it does if it was set in like summer or spring or even autumn, because those seasons last very long. But if you need a metaphor, and I think it's correct, a metaphor of like as we were talking about transitions and moving from one state to another, and like going from the past to the future, and like borders and all that. Spring, summer and autumn are very long seasons. Winter is the only season where you have a symbol of like transition like that. You have the ice, you have the snow, you have the snowflakes. Like snowflakes are extremely beautiful, but they only last for an infinitesimal amount of time.
Yeah.
Like we all like the thing about snow, and like especially you're coming from like hot climates like us, when we first see snow, we're just like enthralled with it,
I know.
And you look at the snowflake, and you're like, this is so beautiful, and you think and when you remember the knowledge that every snowflake is different. like no snowflake is no two snowflakes are alike. Like using the symbol of snow and ice for these three characters, and even for people in those kind of situations, it makes sense. And I'm glad that you kept it, because again, like that's the first time I've seen anything like that in a live action film. The only other time I've ever seen anything about ice harvesting was a animated short film that I saw at the Busan International Short Film Festival. It was a Portuguese film, and it was about these ice harvesters, but they're not on a lake, they're up on a mountain. This guy and this dad and his son are harvesting ice. So when you show that, I was like, oh, okay. So finally, I honestly did not know ice harvesting was a real job, because I was like, it was like, wow. I'm like, kudos to those men who do that. Like,
and it's quite interesting because it's not the full-time job, because you can only do that seasonally.
Yeah.
So a lot of them, like, they might have those skill sets, but in other seasons they would have other jobs.
Yeah.
You know.
So it's again another symbol of transition, and another symbol of being, what's not temporariness, is temporariness a word? That's not a word.
Yeah, I think
there's a word. Is it?
Yeah.
But that's the word
Maybe
I'm coming
the
up
word
with.
is transient.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, transient. Yeah, and like, you know, like something that lasts temporary is beautiful and it's impactful, but it's over so quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that they're probably gonna come in out, but like I think that's like for our conversation. I think we've had an extremely beautiful conversation. I really enjoy this, and I really enjoy your film. And I'm gonna check out Wet Season and Ilo Ilo, because I love films like that. You know, where it talks, especially when you center female characters, you know, like struggling. And I'm always impressed when male filmmakers are able to make films about women going through very real issues that affect women, like, you know, like infertility issues, like in the in Wet Season and Ilo Ilo, working as a maid. Like I've had many jobs, and I worked as a nanny and as a maid, and I've had similar situations where the mom is like, I'm the mother, and I'm like, but you hired me to look after a kid, why are you taking umbrage now? There we go. She's there. So we're gonna wrap it up. So thank you so much, Anthony, for taking the time to talk with me about your film, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.